Morning, everyone. Thank you for being here at the Village of Ruidoso workshop meeting. If you will stand with me, we'll have a moment of silence and then join me in the pledge. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. All right, thank you, everybody. So I know you're all excited. Everybody's going to be going to Debbie Land, known as Santa Fe. The Chamber's going to be having Lincoln County Days Wednesday. So I know most of us are going to be there. We're looking forward to it. So can I have a roll call, please, ma'am?
Mayor Crawford?
Here.
Councilor Eby?
Here.
Councilor Letterman?
Here.
Councilor Hooker?
Here.
Councilor Jackson?
Here.
Councilor Corey?
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. We'll start off with item number 1, discussion on agreement between the Village of Ruidoso and Healing America's Heroes for grant administration on capital outlay grant number 24-12993 in the amount of $450,000 even. Ron.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. This agenda item, the village did receive the $450,000. We are the grantee. This agreement is just between us and the Healing America's Heroes. We'll be working with them, but the village will be administering the funds. We're talking to a contractor, but he's on a state price agreement, possibly getting an architect. This would be doing some renovations to one of the old buildings there that they want to build a storefront. They want to put a small conference center and some offices. So we'll be at the regular meeting. If we could put this as a regular item, Eddie Crane, I invited him over, and Al, can't remember his last name, but have him come and also visit.
Yeah, I forgot it too.
Al Delasso or Colosso.
Yeah.
Ron, when we act as agent like this, do we get any type of compensation?
Mayor Crawford, Council Corey, no.
It's just helping improve the.
Yes, and this funding, we had a couple years ago, they were trying to work with another entity, and due to the audit findings, we did visit with the state. We said, if we need to jump in there and be the fiscal agent, we can, but we received the funds as the grantee we're the owner of the project.
Right.
And not as a fiscal agent. Also, General Services Department owns the infrastructure there. The state owns the infrastructure at the Fort Stanton, so.
Okay, thank you.
Our staff was just good enough because they had received funding before, and then the other municipality wasn't able to administer the grant.
We stepped up.
And so then they got another grant, and so the COG is administering some, and then this time they sent the money to us. So Ron's been good enough about jumping.
And Mayor
in.
Crawford, members of the council, any item procuring a contractor, architects, will be coming to council for approval, so.
All right. So regular?
Yep.
Regular.
Okay. Item number 2, we're getting excited about getting the results of this puppy in. Item number 2, discussion on task order RFP number 2024-004P-02, Amendment 1 with Cobb Finley and Associates, Inc. to include additional time for field data collection as part of the storm drain infrastructure asset inventory in the amount not to exceed $272,166.50 for a total project cost of $426,658.25, including New Mexico GRT. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So they've been actively working, as you guys have seen. They have hit their budget. They're requesting an additional 6 weeks of work. They think that 6 weeks will go ahead and finalize that asset inventory. And so that is what you're seeing for the additional cost.
6 weeks?
An additional 6 weeks, just for the culverts. They're going around getting the culverts.
Okay.
Mike and I were up there, was it last Tuesday?
Last Tuesday.
And we saw the modeling. It was exactly what we were predicting to see with the field work. We were out there between the field work and J.E. Fuller's model. It actually is pretty accurate.
So
And
the
Mayor,
floodplain, floodway is not going to be done next week?
No, Mayor and Council, just as a quick response to that, so there's two things being done in the field.
H&H.
One is the H&H and the other one's the asset assessment. So the H&H is what they're working on to be done by the February 11th meeting to make sure we get all of that reviewed. The asset piece is where they're actually looking at all of the culverts, identifying them, identifying other pieces of infrastructure, and making sure if we have those identified, they're labeled, GIS labeling, and then on top of that, if they need to be impacted by the H&H later on, we have a full account of what's going to be impacted. So H&H will be done, but they're still doing the asset component of it.
And that is in the affected areas?
Yes, sir.
So it will be presented next week.
There's going to be a discussion. More than likely, they'll split the information that they have. They are completely done with the Upper Ruidoso, and they'll be presenting that on the 11th. They are still working on Cherokee Bill, which is what runs along 70. They may need 2 more weeks for that, or a couple more weeks.
But we can start, I mean, because we've got so many folks.
We can definitely start having a discussion, and depending on the direction council takes, what happens with the Upper
Get that in
Ruidoso.
front of FEMA so they can start giving us their,
That would come to you all for adoption and review, yes.
okay, where do y'all want
I think regular,
I do too.
it? Okay, regular.
Thank you.
a lot of plates in the air.
Item number 3 is presentation by New Mexico Economic Development Department on programs, tools to implement the Village of Ruidoso's economic development goals, and we are very excited. So Jim Lucero, and then we got Kevin Wilson, and these guys,
And Mayor and Council, I just want to do a quick introduction and thank you for these guys coming down. Jim and Kevin have been working with us on multiple items. As the council has requested, training on some economic development tools that will help us as we move forward through the recovery process. And this allows you to get a stronger understanding on some of those items that may be coming to you in the very near future as we look to help rebuild the village. So with that, I'll turn
and we're
it
talking
over.
about things like LIDA and,
Different types of structures, yes. So they'll cover all of the tools that we have in place.
okay. And so no Mr. Gutierrez.
He will be online.
He'll be online, okay.
Mr. Gutierrez is actually joining us from Zoom. Can you hear us okay, Daniel?
Yeah, sounds like a KB
can, thank you.
93.5 announcer there. He's got the voice. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Kevin Wilson, Regional Representative with the New Mexico Economic Development Department. Jim and I are the boots on the ground for the department, and my apologies in advance to the Village of Ruidoso for all of the paper they had to print. I was not aware that Alex is going to be handing out our slides. It's quite a bit. And let me know if we're ready to go on the slides.
Hey, Mayor, Council, if you have questions along the way, please, stop us and ask. We will have a Q&A between each section, but that's a lot of stuff. You might, want to ask that question initially right away, so, feel free to interrupt.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so Economic Development Department today, I'd like to talk a little bit about what our department is. First off, our mission is to improve the lives of New Mexico families by increasing economic opportunities and providing a place for businesses to thrive. Our department is the Economic Division, includes the Job and Training Incentive Program, the Community Business and Rural Development Team, Main Street, the Office of Science, Strategy, and Technology, Military Base Planning, Spaceport Authority, the Film Office. Our leadership is Rob Black, Cabinet Secretary, actually a Lovington native. He's been in the region quite often. Isaac Romero is our Deputy Cabinet Secretary. Our Economic Division, Mark Roper, a former regional rep for this area, is the Division Director. Sarah Gutierrez is the Deputy Division Director. Jennifer Myers is the team leader of the CBRD team, which is also known as the Regional Reps, and that is actually us. The regional reps are throughout the state. We're the boots on the ground for the Economic Development Department. There are currently 10 of us. The full team is 11. We have 2 representatives in all 6 of these regions, with the exception right now of Region 4, which seeing the counties in Region 4, you would imagine that's a population-based decision. And then Region 5, where one of our reps, Luis Marquez, actually left us a few weeks ago to take a job with New Mexico Spaceport Authority. Region 6 is the Southeast region. Jim lives in Portales, I live in Roswell, and we live in the regions that we represent. We were asked to cover the following items today: tax improvement development districts, LIDA, local option gross receipt tax or LOGART, and industrial parks. We were also asked to talk about what we anticipated coming out of the section. I'm not sure who wanted to know that, but we'll just address that now. As I said before, we're boots on the ground, so it's not really our job to go into public meetings and say what we think the governor and the legislature are going to do. Our job is to follow what the governor and legislature tell us to do. All right, and let's start with tax increment financing, and Daniel is going to be here to join us as well. Daniel knows a little bit more about this than we do. It's not really so much a regional rep position, but I'll go through it. Tax increment financing, it's an economic development tool that gives you funding for public infrastructure inside a designated area. We issue bonds to finance this infrastructure. You repay the bonds from the increased economic activity. The goal is that you improve a district and there's more tax activity, and you cover the bond payments that funded the infrastructure improvements. The area that receives that TIF is called a Tax Increment Development District, or a TID. Statutory authority is in statutes 515(1) through 28. The purpose is to create a mechanism for providing GRT financing and property tax financing for public infrastructure for the purpose of supporting economic development and job creation. It is a political subdivision of the state that is separate from a city, a village, or a county. The TID is governed by a board, which has full responsibility for the bonds, and investors in those bonds take on all the investment risks instead of the local or state government. This is a few steps. Step 1, the governing body approves the plan. The plan is then filed to the clerk with a petition that includes a majority of signatures from owners within that proposed area. The governing body adopts a resolution of intent to form the TID, and owners, developers may enter into an agreement with the governing body about the improvement of that property. The governing body then may require petitioners to prepare a feasibility study, and the costs of the study are on those property owners. They would initially be repaid in the ensuing bond sale. Then the Tax and Rev Department, Department of Finance Administration, and LFC are notified within 10 days.
Who markets the bond?
I'm sorry?
Who markets the bond?
Those are done just in the bond process, Jim.
It goes in the open market.
Yeah, just an open market process generally. There's a public hearing between 30 and 60 days after the resolution is adopted. There's an election for the governing body schedules a resolution, schedules an election after the resolution, and unless they waive the election, then the election takes place. If it's successful, all of the parties are notified. The county clerk receives notice of formation, and the district is put together. Now, if we get to this phase, there are 2 types of governance, and there are about 7 TIDs in the entire state, and most of them are option 2. Option 1, the governing body acts as the TIDs board, and that is the case with Mesa del Sol and Albuquerque and Las Cruces. Option 2 is what most of the TIDs do. It is a 5-member board with the DFA secretary and then 4 appointed members. 2 of them are 6-year terms and 2 of them are 4-year terms. So we have staggered terms. And future members are elected by a majority of the property owners and residents in the TID. Sorry about that. Okay, and then the districts that are undeveloped, they're a pretty straightforward process, but if you've got property that's ongoing, it's a little bit more complicated. The most complicated aspect of all is that the board has to account for anything that'll come in place during the years of the decades-long bonds. If there's a construction spike due to COVID, you have to anticipate that 20 years out. That's a little bit difficult. And then because the TID creates a new location code, The district is actually responsible for making sure all of the property owners in that district report the taxes, or they don't receive any of the benefit. And as I said before, TIDs aren't really something that we do as regional reps most of the time, and I would recommend talking to the Tax and Revenue Department. David Monteith is the local government liaison, and he does a lot of questions on TIDs. But I will throw it to Daniel right now and see if there's anything that you would like to mention. Daniel?
Sorry about that. Yes, no, you did a great job. And the only thing I would just add is in terms of getting the increment for the TID for the tax finance district, to get the GRT, there is a long process going through getting state approval to get the GRT. So that's a whole process in of itself if you're looking to get the state GRT increment. And I think that's up to 75% of the increase in that district. But I think we have some, I think TRD has a fact sheet on that, on how to go about that as well.
Okay, thank you. And actually, that reminds me, we did go past a slide with the clicker. The NMFA has to review the bonds, determine if they'll be used in accordance with the district plan, and present findings to the legislature. So you can already tell that this is a lengthy process. And the issuance and maximum amount will be specifically authorized by law. Okay, at this point, we'll stop if there are any questions.
Kevin, I'll go ahead and stop you here. So Mayor and Council, just as an example of when you would use a TID, really they can be used in two different scenarios. The first is where you're looking at clear land where you have a clean slate and there's possible development that will happen in the future. Because it's an incremental component, what you're looking at is you're trying to identify where to maximize that increment. So if you have zero building on an area and you identify it as future development, you would create the TID over that district so that your baseline is maybe the X amount, the small amount that you're paying on the land. Once the development comes in, that's where you actually see the increase in what the increment is for. And so the more you get on that increment, the more goes back into the TID, either to pay down the infrastructure, to pay down whatever it is that's listed within those components that you've established. And so the board of the TID would, just like anyone else, justify what that bond is for. So making up a number and making up a project, but if you go out for $80 million because you're going to do a huge industrial park and you're going to develop infrastructure and everything that leads to that park, over the course of 20 years, those businesses that come in and create GRT, and if the state agrees to match up to the 75% component, or there's other legislative approaches that allow you a little bit more. But if you allow that to happen, that's how that ends up getting paid on. So once that bond ends up occurring, once everything ends up getting paid off, it's the increment from the GRT that you never see that actually goes into paying down that debt. So it's not a tax on someone else, it's the GRT that would have been created that goes into the system. And so just to make sure we separate from a tax versus the actual GRT that would have been generated that goes into the project.
And you said that the board is in charge of inspecting those tax records to make sure that people are paying it. How do you do that when we can't even get past TRD now? We can't get any information out of TURD. I mean, we can't. We had to sue them last time.
Yeah, we're not able to, we don't know what taxpayers paying what. I mean, we don't have that.
When TIDs are formed, one of the requirements that ends up happening is the board actually receives a certification note from the taxpayers that they did in fact submit their taxes.
They don't actually know the number.
They don't know a number, they just know that they submitted their requirements to Tax and Rev.
Okay.
And so you have a list of maybe, again, if it's 20 participants, you get your list monthly or whenever the taxes are paid that says, yes, I submitted my taxes for this group, and all 10 of them would submit their letter verifying that.
And the board member can be anybody in that district that has a vested interest or?
An option two, is that?
Yes, where you were saying that the board of directors are made up of people in that district and they're voted on. So in 6-year and 4-year terms or whatever, and if you're not able to fulfill your term.
It'd be reappointed.
Okay. Okay, and how big is that district? Is it just over the actual plat of the property that you're talking about?
Whatever the limits of the TID are.
So you said determines the size.
So, okay. So it could be a section of town?
Yes.
And Mayor and Council, we spoke with Chris Muirhead, our bond attorney, and he worked on one in Albuquerque. It's within UNM and City of Albuquerque, in an area there by the, where they have the rodeo grounds and all that. So they were working on something there. He said, so he has a lot of information also.
Rod, could you give an example of how we would use this?
Well, Mayor Crawford, Councilor Corey, the example that Chris said is they were doing some development there at UNM, like at the stadium or there on the college and the university property itself. And they were going to develop this area and build and bring in businesses and bring in infrastructure. So that's what they were using that for. But it was a huge area, though, is what he talked about.
Well, and just practically at home, what we're talking about is out at the racetrack with the Downs, developing a TID, where any improvements, let's say there was an event center, let's say they put a hotel in, they do any other upgrades out there, the over increase of the GRT that they're experiencing now would then go back to the TID to maybe, yes. And so it's things like that we've been talking about with these guys and going and talking to them in Albuquerque at their offices about what options that do we have of getting some of this outside funding and working together to, for our economy boost 2.0. And then that was something that was brought up at the Downs, and we've been trying to explain to them it doesn't really cost anybody anything extra now, because they'll still get their baseline, correct?
Yes.
I believe that's correct.
Okay, baseline, and then anything over that is what is then geared to the project in a selected district. And so it was to try to give a better explanation. I wish they were here. That would be cool. That they could understand more about how these things work. So it gives opportunity for the community, and that, you know, rather than trying to, because that's one of the things we're looking at is public-private partnerships, but also something like this just for economic development.
Yeah, and the district does need buy-in from all of its members because the members are the ones who are going to have to report that tax code.
Yes. Mayor and Councilor Corey, one of the other options is if we ever decide to grow the airport, you may want to put a TID over the airport. And as we look at developing the airport, whether it's with future businesses, whether it's a component of an industrial park, whether it's the building of the training facilities, all of that area, what our current GRT is now would be our base amount. And then anything that increases above that would be able to go back into
So
that
if it's
district.
just raw land, what GRT are you getting off of it? You're still
Zero.
property tax.
So there's a
So,
base.
for example, what we've been talking about out here, if we were to go in with a TID on the industrial park or whatever we want to do, that'd be 100% increase. And that we could get up to 75% of the state share?
Through legislative process, you could get up to 75%. There are areas where you can request more, but the legislature would have to approve.
Okay. Savi?
Yes, thank you.
But it's just a tool.
Yeah, it's almost like a special tax district.
Yep, just another thing in the toolbox. Danielle, anything else you want to add? All right, well, we're going to let Daniel go because he is actually going to be doing a 3-day Main Street conference tomorrow, so there was no way we're going to be able to pull him away from Santa Fe today. But we appreciate your help very much, Daniel.
We'll see you tomorrow,
We'll be
Daniel,
there
at the
tomorrow.
conference.
Or today.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. And now let's start on LEDA, Local Economic Development. And we're going to turn the calendar back quite a bit to 1912. New Mexico created the anti-donation clause, which you're all very familiar with and probably very frustrated by. It states that neither the state nor any county, school, or municipality shall directly or indirectly lend or pledge or make any donation to or in aid of any person, association. Basically, it means government can't give to a private business or an individual. In 1994, voters approved an exception to that in the Constitution for economic development. The exception can only exist locally, and you must opt into it by creating a Local Economic Development Act. We have 77 communities and 30 counties with the LEDA ordinance in place, including Ruidoso Downs, and Lincoln County. Creating a LEDA, you guys have done this, but this was many years ago. It's created via the ordinance process, and it needs to include these elements. What businesses are qualifying entities, what contributions the community can make, the requirement of ROI to offset the public contribution, the discretionary nature of LEDA, and how we protect the public investment. We'll deal with each of these. And we're going to run through these very quickly. These are what New Mexico considers qualifying entities in its LEDA statute, which is 510.3, industry for mining, manufacturing, processing, or assembling of agricultural or manufacturing products. A commercial enterprise for storing, warehousing, distributing, or selling products of agriculture, mining, or industry. A business which supplies services to the general public or governmental agencies or a specific industry. Indian nation, tribe, pueblo, or federally chartered tribal corporation. Telecommunications sales enterprise that makes the majority of its sales outside of New Mexico. A facility for the direct sales of growers of agriculture products, commonly known as farmers markets. A business that is the developer of a metropolitan redevelopment project. A cultural facility or a retail business. A community is authorized but not obligated to include any of these as qualifying entities in its LEDA ordinance. What a lot of communities are doing now, just to keep up in case the legislature decides we're going to add, say, medical facilities to LEDA. What a lot of places are doing is they're basically saying whatever the state says is a qualifying entity is a LEDA qualifying entity under our ordinance. That's the easiest way to do it in my mind, because you don't have to edit your ordinance and go through that process every time the state decides to make a change, which you probably see in your uniform traffic ordinance. Now, looking at your qualifying entities, this is the 2009 LEDA ordinance. Those that fit most or all of the criteria will be selected when considering assistance under LEDA. This list is not necessarily inclusive, and should an industry fall outside this preferred list, individual consideration will be granted. I went to our attorney at EDD a little while ago and asked, so does this clause right here mean that it's vague enough that any business already qualifies under the LEDA ordinance because of how vague it is? And as written, council said that 2009-13 is vague enough to allow anything as a qualifying entity. So you guys are good if you don't want to update your ordinance. But if you do, we will help advise you on it. Contributions, these are what we consider allowable contributions under LEDA. Any combination of land, building, infrastructure, you can discount it or you can donate it, or financial assistance to reimburse costs for any combination of land, building, infrastructure. Now, why do we go that route, land, building, infrastructure? Because no matter what happens to the business, those assets stay in the community. So even if the business puts everything on a moving truck and takes off, somebody else has an improved asset and you have something to market as a community. And our basic rule is if it can go on a moving truck, LEDA is not going to pay for it. And then why do we reimburse? Why don't we go upfront money? We have to protect the public investment. This is taxpayer money. We want to protect it. But also we can tie reimbursement to meeting certain criteria. So that way we can front load the money in some ways. What we'll often do is we'll reimburse most of our award for when you get a certificate of occupancy. A community funds these contributions. They can spend up to 10% of their general fund on an individual LEDA project, or they can adopt a local option gross receipt tax that assists in economic development projects. That'll be our next section. A citizen election is required for this. We determine ROI with private investment, job creation, both the quantity and the quality, and how the business will complement the local economy. Like let's say Southwest Cheese in Clovis, they're going to complement the dairy industry. It will enhance existing businesses, possibly attract new ones. And retail is now a LEDA component. Maybe we want a clothing store so people aren't driving to Lubbock for those things. We prevent leakage to other communities. That local dollar circulates a few more times. The discretionary nature of LEDA, again, I said before, authorized but not required. You're authorized to assist qualifying entities. You don't have to assist every single business that applies, and you don't have to provide the same assistance you provided to somebody else. It's discretionary in nature throughout. And as I said again, these are public investments. We must protect them. So these protections include some type of security. We can put liens on property. We can put lines of credit, CDs, mortgages, surety bonds, or equipment liens that's greater than or equal to the money that's provided for reimbursement. Now, let's say there's a business you want to assist. How do we do that? We go through the public process where we come to the village council. And to do that, we need two things. We need a project participation agreement, which is between the community and the business. Basically, the community says, this is what we'll contribute, and the business says, this is what we plan to do to receive that contribution. And they also agree on what security will be in place to protect that investment. And then, this is important, not a resolution, but an ordinance is required. So this will require at least 2 meetings to put into place. That's probably the longest part when we tell people it's a 60 to 90-day process. And now, how does the state participate? And usually the state is the biggest participant on LEDA. We have a dedicated LEDA fund that the legislature funds most years. The amount of money that's given to a particular business is at the discretion of the executive branch, aka the governor, or as we at EDD say, the fourth floor. And when LEDA first started, the legislature was the one that voted on these individual LEDA projects. But you can see that top-down approach having some very bad flaws because LEDA can be competitive. People want those businesses in their town. So you have the opportunity, and I'm not saying this happened, but maybe one community decides to tank a project that's happening in another community because they have the votes. And also requests had to fit in a legislative session. I cannot imagine being a business who comes to the state and applies for help on March 20th and is told, how about January? Does that work for you? It's not a very business-friendly window. So now in New Mexico Economic Development Department, we handle that task year-round, and we report during every session on the fund's effectiveness. Our department is agnostic about where a business locates as long as it's in New Mexico. Regional reps are not agnostic. We want activity in our area. And then EDD, we're not the LEDA police, as Division Director Roper likes to say. The L in LEDA stands for local for a reason. We will advise communities like we're doing today, but we're not going to tell you what to do. Now, when a business wants to work with the state on a LEDA award, this is what they've got to do. They go to me and Jim in our region. They fill out a data sheet that outlines their future plans. This is how many people we want to hire. This is the capital expenditures we want to do. We will take that data and we'll go to our economists. We'll calculate out the public benefit. And if this looks like something good, our administration will go to the fourth floor, talk with the governor, and determine if an award is appropriate, and if so, how much is appropriate. If we get that, we then go to the business, we give them an offer letter. That offer letter is an invitation to apply for that funding. As I will often tell businesses when we start, we're currently in the line to get the tickets to get the beer in the other line. So it is kind of a lengthy process. And once a state application is complete, we're going to go through a very similar public process to what you would go through when it's just a local participation. It's still, because we need local help. As a state agency, we're still bound by the anti-donation clause. You'll recall that that exception can only exist locally. So what we have to do is we have to go through a place that has a LEDA ordinance in place. So what would be an illegal contribution instead becomes a government transfer. We provide the contribution to you, you agree to be the fiscal agent and contribute it to the business. And it should be said at this point that the community becomes the fiscal agent. There's no financial benefit initially for the fiscal agent, except that there is increased economic activity in the area. And the business has to be a qualifying entity under that community's existing LEDA ordinance, even if the state is the one that's providing all of the assistance.
Can you hold on?
Yes.
You're moving through a lot of stuff right there, but what kind of metrics do you look for when your community's trying to assess a project or a business, or and what, because you said it determines the amount of money that can be put in the program. Is there a set formula for that? Like how many jobs you need to provide or how much total revenue?
It's discretionary for many reasons. A job in Ruidoso is a lot more valuable than a job in Albuquerque, and a $15 an hour job is more valuable than a $12 an hour job. That is above the pay grade as regional reps as far as the formula is. If we find out what the formula is, we'll be happy to share it when we get it.
Politics plays into that at that point?
It's discretionary, Mayor. And
I'll neither confirm nor deny that, Mayor.
We'll get it ready to go.
That does make it, put it all the ball in their court to make that decision. But I do know quality of jobs and quantity of jobs play a major part. even more so than the capital expenditure for the project, because those jobs stay here long past the construction process.
So if we had a bicycle manufacturer, clothing manufacturer, whatever, outdoor activity, we had a disc golf manufacturer that we put out at our industrial park. We go after LEDA, they figure they're gonna do 10 jobs, here's an estimate. So we do that, we get a figure, and then once they pay that off,
So Mayor and Council, one of the things I think that's important, especially with LEDA and with communities like ours, is that because it's so fluid, you can establish your own criteria and really push that as a requirement that you'd like to look for. So in that, if we establish like an economic development plan and we say, based on the types of incentives we'd like to give and request from the state, if we hit, and again, making up numbers, but let's say you find your bicycle manufacturer and you hit, they're willing to commit for $100 million for 20 years and what they can do. That could be anything from, okay, if you have X amount of jobs that pay X amount of money, and we establish that and connect it to a CPI increase annually, that could be a requirement that we include and pitch to the state. If we say you have to, we're looking at so much X in sales for GRT to be contributing to the community. If they don't hit that, it could be on a sliding scale. So honestly, as both gentlemen mentioned, it's fluid in the sense that we really have the ability to govern that. When we go to the state to make a request for how much we think they can contribute, at the end of the day, it's how much ROI will the state get in state GRT funds, and what do we think it'll cost for them to be here for 10 to 20 years. But when they leave, obviously either that sunsets or we can try and request a different component. So there's been situations where someone may get $5 million in incentives for infrastructure. The contract may be for them to stay for 20 years, but they end at 10. So you get that extra 10 years of GRT going into the system. Just depends on how you'd like to structure
and what
the
if
deal.
there's a failure? Is the local community on the hook for the difference?
They don't pay.
Mayor,
go ahead, Jim.
Council, it's, to add to Mr. Martinez's comments, for us, we usually put our LEDA terms in our project participation agreement, a 5-year term. And during that time, we do an incentive analysis. So we know from the information they provide us, what our return on investment is, where the hurdle rate is, where we get that money paid back in full through gross receipts usually, and the jobs that are created. But we talk in terms of 5 years. We've seen 10-year agreements for cities, but that on a city level, local level, you determine on your project participation agreement how to determine when you want that to expire.
But
And
following through the mayor's comment, what happens if the enterprise
Doesn't hit.
What's great about LEDA, it's a reimbursable fund. So they have to expend that first before they get any kind of reimbursement. So you're not on the hook for any money that comes out of that because of that reimbursement process.
And during the term of the project, we have security. The company has to put in security equal to any money that they're reimbursed. So until that project is considered complete, and then to consider a project complete, we'll come back to you and we'll have to do a repealing ordinance that will say, okay, this project is over. It's a great day for economic development because we get to prove the ROI works. It's a great day for the business because the state is out of their hair after 5 years. And usually they're staying in the community and they're still providing those benefits. But the security aspect, Council Corey, is one of the biggest reasons. That's one of the biggest things we do. We have to protect the public investment. So you'll have something to claw back if the business just goes belly up.
So if you already have the money, why do you need LEDA?
To reimburse.
To reimburse.
So
You get free money is basically what you're saying is if you go through the whole program?
It's an incentive program to repay you back to zero, yes.
Mayor
Or to
Coughlin,
a
Council,
amount.
It's basically acts like a forgivable loan. So it instead of a grant, it's more really developed and organized as a forgivable
Well,
loan.
we're big fans of zero forgivable loans.
But
But
with the
again-
go-between.
Yeah.
So why would we need,
Well, if we bring a business in, if we bring an industry in, we bring a manufacturer, developer, or whatever, and we have a district that's LEDA, then we can go through a program like that to help them get financing because we don't have the capital to put them in, to bring them into the community, to develop our GRT and extend our economic development, so.
And Mayor and Council, just as an example, you all talked about the bicycle manufacturer. So if we generated an economic development plan and the goal was to enhance outdoor recreation, and we were trying to recruit businesses, this would help us recruit those types of business. It would help them with infrastructure building.
We've got
Yeah.
the building blocks that you need. And these are not all hypotheticals. They've come up in years past with Giant Manufacturer, the bicycle company, Marin, and then we've had others over the years that were interested, but we weren't ready.
What are some examples of the securities the business puts up?
For example, right now, we have a LEDA deal in place at Lincoln County with Noisy Water Winery. They have a certificate of deposit on account right now.
Line of credit, security bonds, we would take, inventory on equipment and stuff that's equal to
Yep. We do want a 6-to-1 ratio on equipment, Leon, because the equipment's valuable to you, but once you go to the auction block, you guys know how the price drops. So we look for at least a 6-to-1 ratio.
So for the business, those assets are encumbered. They're
That's
not
correct.
able to leverage them.
on the inventory liens and stuff like that. Of course, line of credit as well.
And that's usually encumbered.
Jim and Kevin,
Many banks that give those out.
can you provide the council just some projects that you've worked with in your district and ongoing that you may have?
The Noisy Water Winery was one that we were talking about, where their security was a certificate of deposit. Havana, which is a cannabis manufacturer in Clovis, they've put about 12 jobs into the area that are very good paying jobs. They are actually using an equipment lien. A lot of the others were basically using a line of credit, and some of the other ones, we can't talk about them right now because we haven't gone through the public process, and we've got a confidentiality policy in place.
But they're all manufacturers, we cannot support anything other than manufacturers or.
Retail.
We shy away from the retail aspects.
But your deal said that you can.
We can, but we generally do not reimburse retail at the state level unless there's a very compelling reason. And I can actually bring up one. Melrose Tire is considered a retail business, a service industry. They needed to replace some tanks, the fuel tanks, and put in some new underground storage tanks. They did not have the finances to do that on their own. So basically, the Village of Melrose and EDD stepped up, and we provided them assistance to do that. In return, they're going to keep at least 15 jobs on the payroll. The alternative without the LEDA assistance is Melrose Tire shuts down, and if you've ever been through Melrose, you understand how important Melrose Tire is to Melrose.
It's a restaurant, it's a tire shop, it's gas, it has all that, so it was impactful for that community. So that was supported on a state level.
Yes, and I actually lived in Clovis when Melrose Tire burned a few years ago, and that was a devastating few months for the community because there were some people who would eat there 2 or 3 times a day.
Mayor and Council, I think one of the items is you look for anchor components. I think retail will start looking, especially for tourism communities, if you can show the significance in ROI plus the significance of GRT increase. For example, something like the racetrack that has $160 million impact to the community, if there's something that ever came to that degree, LEDA, from a retail perspective, would probably be entertained at the state level just because of the impact for GRT, or at least we would make that argument. So those are the kinds of things I think you look at. It's not necessarily for something smaller that they would be focusing on from a retail perspective. Is that?
We're not looking to help a Spencer's out per se. However, I will bring up something that's Spencer's Gifts, like you see in every mall next to a Hot Topic.
Right, okay.
But it actually, I don't have this on the slide, but it's kind of worth mentioning. The city of Clovis has a retail LEDA policy where they basically provide some of the GRT that's created by the business. And so basically, you provide, you create this many GRTs, and you're allowed to be reimbursed for a percentage that would have went to the city's general fund otherwise. That way, we don't have any of the other stigmas with LEDA. They won't have to do security. They don't have to go through a credit. They don't have to go through a due diligence process, because basically, if they don't create sales, they don't produce GRT, they don't get reimbursed. And we think it's actually a very good program that the city of Clovis and Tina Zook has put in, and it's kind of the brainchild of Justin Howald, the city manager. And we'll be happy to talk with city officials on that at some point as well. Getting back to the slides, if the state is participating in a LEDA deal, we'll do the same public process. We'll have the PPA, which is between the company and the business. We'll have the ordinance that ties it together. We'll also add in an intergovernmental agreement, or an IGA. And what the IGA does is it establishes the state making the contribution and the city's role as a fiscal agent. Now, the next question, which is natural, what if there's a LEDA deal where the locality wants to contribute to what the state is doing? Well, we're completely on board for that, and we'd like to do both public processes at the same time, because we're not creating bureaucracy. If we do it in two separate public processes, we do this twice. We probably have to tell a councilman, no, we didn't do this before. This is a separate component from the local one. So we don't have two separate but largely similar sets of ordinances that the business has to follow. We eliminate a little bit of bureaucracy for them. We show a united front on improving the local and state economy. And then another question, is it possible to triple dip if both the city and the county have a LEDA deal in place? And the answer, yes, it is. It's a little bit more complicated than IGA, but it generally doesn't happen that way because a lot of cities and counties don't have set aside funding for economic development projects. A lot of the communities just have LEDA ordinances so they can facilitate pass-throughs like we're talking about right now. For instance, Lincoln County has done 2 Lincoln LEDA deals, and they were both Noisy Water Winery, and they're both completely state assistance with Lincoln as the pass-through agency.
What were the proceeds used for the Noisy Water?
The proceeds, I'm sorry?
A warehouse.
Yes.
It was for infrastructure.
Yes.
Infrastructure and equipment. I know there was discussion that he wanted to do housing, but that was thrown out because we really were trying to push that too.
Yeah, and if Jasper wanted to do that, he would have been on his own there. We weren't going to reimburse housing because that's not an allowable category. But the warehousing is the primary thing, and it actually helped them expand their cider line and expand their wine line. And then another example of a project that we're currently working on, Noisy Water Winery does co-packing for Enchantment Vineyards in Portales. Enchantment Vineyards is trying to move all their production in-house to Portales. So that will actually give be a little bit less work for Jasper to do, but Noisy Water Winery does pretty well on its own, and Jasper's happy to let them take over their own operations. Now, there is one instance where LEDA is not upfront money, and this is where communities can benefit. It's called municipal LEDA. In 2020, the state decided to expand its LEDA fund, particularly for small communities that were at a natural disadvantage when it came to trying to attract manufacturers and other entities, because they lack the infrastructure and economic capacity that, say, an Albuquerque or Las Cruces would have. So what happens is the community applies to NMEDD for municipal LEDA. The money's upfront, and we'll pass an IGA that outlines the eligible expenses for the community, the spending deadlines, and the reporting requirements. We closed out one last year. EDD provided the city of Clovis $2.135 million, and it covered almost all of the $2.5 million expenses to expand the water line 6 miles from the city limits to the Clovis Regional Airport. And we actually have a municipal LEDA that's going on with the city of Roswell to improve their infrastructure at the Air Center. They just provided their biannual report on that as well. And with that, we'll break, and that is it for LEDA, and I'll stand for questions now.
Anybody?
Just one there. You said that you reviewed the information from the local entity, that all the financials, I'm sure the progress and possibly any negative aspects, but you also said that you don't that you don't tell communities what to do, but you advise. So question is, do you sit in on the board meetings to have a presence there to give advice, or is that just by invitation?
Generally, if we're at meetings, we're there to support the company and to help explain the processes.
Did that answer your question, Counselor? I'm not exactly sure if.
So you're there to support.
In general, they're not in the board meetings after LEDA is passed. It's more of a, how would it work? What would the structure be? And then,
So the advice is beforehand.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mayor, council, if it's okay with you, I prefer to sit versus stand. That's my comfort level. We're going to talk about LOGAR, which is local option gross receipts tax. And anytime we start talking taxes in governing bodies, they get nervous. You know, raising taxes is something that most communities do not want to do. It's something that's, is seriously considered and mostly frowned upon. But in this case, this gross receipts tax increment would go to economic development exclusively. As you see on the screen in front of you, this is the village's breakdown. I don't have to, explain that to you. You probably know it way better than I do. And there it is. Next slide. So what is the increments and what can they be used for? Like I said, it's a 0.25%, 25%, or 25 cents on $100. It's not a lot. It's a small increment, but it adds up quickly over time. In my past life, I was city councilor for Portales. Portales has LOGART. I can talk to you a little bit of my experience with that because I was also the economic developer for Roosevelt County and Portales. And we have LOGART as part of our LEDA ordinance. And the advantage of that we had was especially highlighted over during COVID. Our neighbors to the north, due to their population size at the time, were not eligible to have a retail component with their ordinance. Portales was, and with that component, we were able to use LEDA funds for retention during COVID. We gave out $25,000 grants. We did 2 cycles of it. And that was, I think, pivotal for our community to be able to retain those during that very difficult time for everybody. But again, having passed LOGART in the city of Portales and had that fund available enabled us to do that. Yes, sir.
LOGART to repay or to secure LEDA? Is that what you're saying?
LOGART is an increment that is used for LEDA.
It is used for LEDA, so that's how you were able to get the 25,000. We just got grants, but okay, I get it.
Yep. If we would have to use that out of general fund, and every general fund's tight for every community for the most part.
So a LOGART is different than a special SGRT or whatever.
It is a special GRT, but it's specifically designated for economic development.
Okay.
There is one component that could be carved out for, and that's a promotion and administration of professional service contracts, up to $50,000. What that is, use that at a LOGART, and typically is to fund an economic development organization or that position within your community.
Right. Okay, and does that have anything to do with what we could have the additional tax on the convention center or on no, it's different?
It's
an
separate.
additional?
It's additional, yes, sir. It is one that has to be a ballot measure for your community, which makes it, some communities are receptive to that and some are very, any kind of tax increment is not. So we've seen communities in our region that have rejected LOGART measures 3 times, and we've seen one, I think we have the most in our region that have LOGART available to them. So, it is going to be a community-based decision. And how that's promoted is very key if you want to try to pass one of these measures. You do have to work and educate your community on what these funds are for. So that makes it very pivotal how you promote that tax increment, because most people they're not receptive to that, but they know that it's going to have an economic impact, that it might grow businesses, it might, prevent leakage and then grow your community. That usually is a compelling argument and typically does get passed. I mean, it is a small increment for a community, but it is a tax increment.
All right, and the next slide, I'm putting in the communities in New Mexico that have adopted a local option gross receipt tax. You will see that Lincoln County is on there, but there's an asterisk for a reason. Lincoln County put one in. It was $750,000 to offset gaming losses for the state, and then the rest was for a secondary educational facility, UNMU Ruidoso, in the county, and that was sunsetted at the end of 2015.
We're all very familiar with the 2010 one. Some people almost got hung.
Yes.
So, as you can tell.
That's probably why the sunset clause got put in there.
Where it was at, the business ditch, and it was at the racetrack.
Yeah, it's at the racetrack. Yes, sir. Anyway, you can see the communities that currently have LOGART. I know it's local option. I call it local ordinance gross receipts tax. It's pretty much the same. But 6 out of the 9 are in our region.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is that because you're educating everyone, or?
I think we have the best region in the state. And I say that proudly in meetings. We have the most certified economic development organizations out of all. We have 6 out of the 12 that are for the whole state. Half of them are in our region. So I think we're very aggressive in what we do economically development. And, I think that shows as a region.
And we're aggressive because we have to be.
With no interstates running through our region, we have to, think outside the box and grow within.
So can you stack them like a LOGART and then add a TID district?
Yes.
It's,
But there are different measures, the 2 different ballot measures, Mayor.
And who's responsible for making sure that that's separated and collected? Is that?
That collection comes through a tax and rev, and you get that just like any other one. You just rely on the information.
And the district is responsible for anything that happens in that district, Mayor.
TIDs, and they're totally different, but, and LOGART, but.
But if you had a LOGART and then in this one district you added a TID,
you get double, I guess, or what that would be, or whether you get both of those.
Mayor and council, one of the things that's extremely important, I think, as we look to the future on the planning side, creating an economic development plan that identifies how to use these tools, specifying them on where they can be implemented and how they can work together, I think is extremely important. Mayor, just as you said, creating that stack or combining those abilities, whether it's identifying a district, creating LOGART, and as many of you will be attending the conference in Santa Fe for Main Street, there's going to be components that are related to infrastructure on the Main Street side and how we can partner with Main Street, both through LOGART and special districts and LEDA, having a plan to really move forward for a 10-year plan to develop, I think would be extremely important. That helps everything from Midtown. That helps business recruitment in 3 to 5 years. It helps be able to hedge our current businesses and how we build those. So those are plans that we need to do now. Right now, we do everything with grants and we're reactive. Being proactive moving into the future, I think is something that these tools will allow us to do through a planning process.
so right now, both of these measures are built off GRT.
TID and LOGART.
What is the maximum? Because we've reduced our GRT by paying off things in the past. So what is the maximum? I know at one time Taos had the highest GRT. We were pretty close there. Santa Fe, and we've reduced ours. And it's basically a user fee. I mean, you purchase something when you pay it.
It's a consumption fee,
Yeah.
Consumption, that's correct.
I believe it's in the neighborhood of 8.8%. I did look this up, but don't make a liar out of me to give a Jim description of it.
7265 or whatever, so
About 8.8. So that's, and you're incrementing 0.25 cents on the $100.
Yeah, 0.25, yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yep. And also a county can implement an 1/8% on its own, so it could be up to 375. And then Michael mentioned something that might be worth bringing up right now. The NMFA does provide assistance if you want to do some of those plans, up to 100,000, I believe. And in that case, we're generally the ones who write letters of support for that grant, and then we'll review the plan at the end and say that this meets all of the criteria for the grant funding.
Like industrial park,
The next section, we'll talk about that a little bit, but, yeah, that NMFA grant should cover your plan development.
Okay.
And back to Logart in Portales and my personal experience with that, and having that fund available, we used that, we had a old Portales Inn hotel, was sat vacant for 20 years. We were able to bring in a hotel management company, give them a grant to help them get that reopened. And right now, it's revitalized our downtown because we have a hotel now, then they can walk and go to restaurants and all that just locally. So
The management company owns the hotel now?
yes, yep. All we did was help with that, LIDA, help that with have a certificate of occupancy. It means you're open for business.
And then equity, what did they put in? Besides expertise?
Well, no, they had to remodel the whole hotel, so
So they paid for that
there was a
up
$10
front.
million investment for them.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, it was on a reimbursement basis, which was really easy on a dilapidated, closed building. $500,000 went very quickly. But that's a component. We also, in our LIDA ordinance, and I'm sorry if I'm referring back to one in my history, just helps you understand this. Senior Living Center, we gave, was a leakage or a possibility we needed desperately in Portales. We were able to help, with a Good Life Senior Living Center in Portales open up there and help them with LIDA as well. So with this economic development, it can, how you define that, if it's healthcare, retail, obviously manufacturing, heavy and light industrial, all those can be components that it can be in your ordinance that enable you to use that tool, Logart tool, to help with economic development.
And Good Life is an example of local success. They're right next to Roosevelt General Hospital, and they actually are looking to expand.
Yep.
We could use one. So is that also on a 5-year contingency payback? Is that what you're?
That was a local one, not a state one, but yes, we had that as a 5-year as well.
And the impact is significant enough, 5 years will do that?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay.
That's Logart in a nutshell. Any questions you have regarding that as we move forward? Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about industrial parks. I know, Mayor Crawford and Mr. Senna and Mr. Martinez came to our Albuquerque office, and we talked about that with our secretary and our division director. Industrial parks are a good and vital tool for communities to have available for expansion. And what that means expansion-wise, light and heavy industrial, airport, whatever that is, having an industrial park enables us to be able to use those public property to use for industrial purposes. We do not, we what normally say is we will offer consulting companies that are available that do that. We do not do that local at the state level. They are far better at doing that than that. That's when we use that NMFA grant to be able to use those to have that plant and to have an industrial park.
And then the village per se, if we own the property, that would be our investment in, that we could then work with an independent company, some sort of, now industrial, what is industrial? Can that be design? Does it have to be manufacturing? Does it?
That is up to the community.
So it's broad enough.
Yes, sir. It's usually light, some kind of manufacturing component, but I've seen, they put strip malls or
We got
whatever
a
that.
candle in soap magnet that's moved into the community that is looking for, trying to branch out into candles, but
No, we don't want candles.
oh, you just want.
Oh, that's
He's-
bad.
He's looking for all the advantages he can, so.
Can that include lodging facilities?
Not typically. Now, industrial park, by definition, is something that's going to be something that's not typical. Can you have that in your industrial park? Yes. Is it usually supported by some kind of, that would be, we can't answer that question.
So-
We only advise.
So Michael, in the overall scheme of things, when we're talking about a master plan at the airport and then additional property that's located, can you put those together, stack funding for like a FBO and
Yes, sir. So, Mayor and council,
commercial?
my approach, and again, I think a plan is obviously the best way to approach this, but I think a possible cocktail of funding would definitely be if a TID was placed over the entire area that you were looking to develop. I think possibly tapping into Municipal LIDA to get infrastructure out to the area is then the next step. So that helps pay for water, sewer, electric, whatever may be the case. As businesses come in, obviously the tax increment that you would be receiving goes up. If Logart is turned on, obviously there's more funds that are there to partner with the state to incentivize businesses to come into that area, and that helps develop out that area. So you're maximizing your dollar in the sense of now you have the TID on the incremental component that's going up. You have Logart that's matching or utilizing some funds to be able to go into that. If LIDA is turned on, to Councilor Corey's perspective or comment, let's say you also have a commercial area that you're trying to develop on the retail side that's multi-use. Now you actually have hotels and things of that nature that are going up. If you're looking to enhance a possible area for, and just as an example, but we're looking at movies to go out there. We're looking at new entertainment facilities to go out there. Now these end up matching those funds to be able to build that. Well, if the GRT is turned on, everything starts to increment. So it, in essence, becomes self-funded to be able to grow and enhance more and more areas within the region. So yes, you can definitely capital stack your opportunities on how to continue to develop that without spending general fund monies in the area. That's kind of the idea of the tools. They let you have other sources of revenue to grow those capabilities.
Mayor, council, as you develop your industrial park, which could include an airport, just keep in mind that encompasses anything inside the fence goes under FAA jurisdiction as well. So you can have an industrial park, you can have inside your fence in the FAA, and then also the additional outside the fence. So that is something that can be done as well. I know, I think you kind of asked that a little bit on there, but having that plan developed, and then once you develop that plan, you reach out to Municipal LIDA and get the infrastructure that gets you there on a wastewater and water component as well. So,
Jim, I'm curious, your experience with the hotel in Portales,
yes, sir.
that process, does an entrepreneur approach the municipality, or did you?
We were marketing that property because we considered that to be an asset that they needed to be developed. We had to do something, with the city owned that. We ended up taking it over, and we had this building, and we had to make a choice. You know, we either demolish it, which is a very expensive proposition, or we find an investor that comes in and
So
reutilize it.
how did you market it to potential investors?
RFP or what?
No, we went out and just, Sammy Standifer, who was our city manager at the time, went out and just went to these area hotelers and tried and just cold called them and see what we could do to get these. And then we finally got some of those interested and said, I think his Ambience, I can't remember their whole, but anyway, they have many hotels in New Mexico. And we marketed it, we approached them and we promoted it, and we worked out a deal that enabled that to happen.
Like the Patel Express.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well, that's all very good.
And then you have a lot, like, public meetings to
Well,
get people
To get it started for approval,
for
you
our
would need.
ordinance.
Which aspect are we talking
Yeah,
about?
it depends on which
Council?
aspect. Now, on a Logart, is that all public ordinance too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're going to have to do an election resolution and then go to the citizens for the vote.
Yeah.
But once you have that available and that fund becomes available, you have to go through the public process, as you do each time for
And
each.
the industrial park?
Then what?
Well, if you're designating an industrial park, what are the other advantages for that, on funding sources?
Well, it enables you to go, as Mr. Martinez talked about, and be able to use those different components because you have a designated industrial park versus, public land that used to be a school or something.
And the Logart, as well as the TID, can be tied to the MRA. I remember when we put the MRAs in, Metropolitan Redevelopment Area, that was one of the reasons we did that, so it could open up opportunity to businesses within those districts.
And Mayor and Council, the other opportunity that the MRA allows, if these funds are available, is the ability to focus on public-private partnerships for redevelopment. And so those are components within the statutes and the ordinances that have already been tested in different communities. And with these sets of new revenues, because not that they're specifically for anti-donation, but they're for development. And because they're for development, you can really focus on revitalizing communities. As Jim gave an example, anything that's run down that you can redevelop and build, or you can enhance undeveloped areas like your industrial park that we're working on. So depending on where the MRA is at, and we do have 2 MRAs, they can also be used jointly, and you all will be able to, I think, hear about this in the next coming days at the Main Street program, but how Main Street can also be revitalized through some of these components as well. So new sources of revenue. I know we have Main Street in the audience today, but knowing what their plans are, knowing where they're going to be revitalized and how we can enhance that, looking to work with the chamber, looking to work with lodgers tax, how do we leverage those other sources of revenue to help build those components without taxing our community? As Mr. Lucetto said, these are user taxes or user funds. And so it's really the visitors that are coming in that are using our streets, that are using our hotels, that are using these things, that are paying those costs. It's not really the residents. And so that's the other big distinction I think that's important.
Would we have to go further for our MRA since doesn't it just go to
No, that would-
Swiss Chalet?
Yeah, but that was just the businesses that are already in that district, then we could work with them in that district. It wouldn't, and
We
then we
wouldn't
could
have
do
to
it.
have one to go.
No, we do an
to the
industrial
airport.
park or something out there, but one thing that you said earlier, like in Clovis, you were able to extend service lines, water lines, whatever.
Yes, sir.
So, this is where I always get lost. That's an enterprise fund, basically, correct? Like your water, your sewer, those are all enterprise funds. It's built into your basic
Well,
user.
you're talking from a city perspective, how you
So
have
that was
that.
that wasn't a Clovis City line?
It was make it a little more even it was a city line that then is operated by EPCOR, their water management company.
Okay.
Yeah, Clovis doesn't, they don't maintain their own water system.
Okay.
They have a private
Well, I was just
company.
curious why an enterprise fund, and you were talking about, Councilor Corey's was talking about hotels or whatever that you're generating revenue and employee work. Why still don't understand why an enterprise fund owned by the village in a housing district that generates revenue, that generates profits and then jobs to take care of the properties, why that's never considered.
And Mayor Crawford, Councilor Corey, I know you mentioned, I think at our, either at the strategic planning or one of our meetings about, there was a designation in that area for an industrial park, and I'm still trying to find that. We just need to look in the some of the files and find that out.
And also, Mayor Crawford, one of the functions of Municipal Alita is that we're building economic capacity. When you do it as an enterprise fund, you're building for the residents who are already there. This is kind of an if you build it, they will come philosophy.
Okay,
Again, it's infrastructure-based.
okay.
I'd like to throw out a couple of different projects to see if they're eligible underneath this here, or one of these two programs, like say a Midtown parking garage. And also Eddie was talking about possibly entertaining or talking with different studios to build studios out or small-scale studios out in the airport area.
From a state perspective, they would not be, but from a local perspective, how your ordinance is set up, it could be.
And I think you could consider a parking garage to be a retail business.
If you're charging.
Yeah. Or a service.
But if that studio was built in our park, in our industrial park, wouldn't that be okay?
Yeah. I mean, as far as I can understand
Yeah,
it,
that's for you to,
that would be up to us to
okay.
designate within
Okay.
those parameters.
that's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So Mayor, it sounds like we would need to just strategize.
Exactly.
Priorities.
All these things that we're looking at, pick those out, find out which mechanisms fit us the best. But for example, we've got people that are wanting to move into the community that have franchise agreements with certain types of companies that are wanting to move in, that are gonna have to build from the ground up. They could, basically, if we came in and talked to them, we could maybe work on a LEDA package with them for construction of those, because they're looking to go into Artesia, Alamogordo, and they want to come here first. So it's things like that, that when these businesses come in, we've got a aid tool instead of saying you're all on your own, that we can work with them. And that was the whole purpose of these things, to understand what tools that we do have that we can work with businesses, not just new ones, but existing businesses, because we've always wanted to foster growth from inside the community, that if they've shown success and then they want to grow or indeed change or add to their product lines, that we have the ability to help.
In Mayor Crawford and council, you know, you look at the local option tax and, 25 cents to $100, but you look at it, if somebody buys a soda, it's like a penny or so. I mean, it's very minimal, and it's going to be everybody paying it, everybody that buys anything on the retail side, tourists or, locals. It's very minimal.
Yeah. As a consumption tax, it's very minimal, and most wouldn't feel it. It just accumulates over time. We're to a nice level.
As for infrastructure, and let's say a TID let's say the Midtown District, that you wanted to improve it, we wanted to build a walkway up and over. I still think that's a bunch of crap. You always keep dreaming, Tim. Is that something that you could work with too?
When you say you, what?
Well, with the village and then working with RMA, they were always trying to find out ways to better service our downtown traffic. And one big component is when it's busy, it's hard to get across the street. Working with DOT, and we were just trying to figure out ways to move traffic around, and it's gonna take some infrastructure, sidewalks, I don't know, whatever. Things like that, would that be something that could be worked in a TID?
And that might be the justification for creating the TID, actually.
Okay. Okay. So it's just things that we're looking at with these guys that are trying to think outside the box, that we could look at in how to facilitate people up and over around. Okay.
Good opportunity.
Oh, okay. Anybody else?
We thank you for your time, and of course, we gave you our contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We might not have the answer, but we'll find it for you.
Well, we appreciate you guys coming in and reading it, and then you explaining it makes it a lot clearer in my mind. Because forever we were talking about cocktails of funding, and then this stacking terminology just started, so it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
So, okay, well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you for having us.
And I always enjoy your emails that we get on EDD all the time. They're always very informative, so I appreciate that. Gives us ideas.
Very good.
And Kevin, we might, as the mayor stated, you do have the voice for radio, so we might have to,
He has a face for radio too, so.
Again, Jim takes the spotlight from me. I was going to say that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have anything that we need to cover today?
I believe.
Okay.
Jenny has some other items on there. For the regular meeting?
I mean, just keep in mind the links, you know, the stuff that we're looking at out there, that could be a TID or a,
Mayor and council, on the regular meeting, we're also going to have a couple resolutions for the municipal arterial program from DOT on the application.
streets.
Josh has some streets identified and also for the co-op. So that'll be, both will be regular items.
Okay.
What else is on the agenda?
The presentation, new employees and promotions will be under mayor reports and presentation. Of course, our consent regular items, the minutes. Village managers report, so if there's anything specific that we want to talk about. And we might, depending on how we get into it, have some discussions on what's been discussed at the racetrack.
That would be,
With, because that's so fluid. And then there'll be a public hearing for the Planning Commission case RZ 2024-317, rezone request from R1 Family Residential District to C2 Community Commercial District for, this is on Highway 70.
Who's the applicant?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over there, and I don't know how it ended up the way it is anyway, but it is. Then there'll be a public hearing on ordinance 2025-01, ordinance amending the Village of Ruidoso Municipal Code, Chapter 54, Land Use, Article 2, Zoning, Division 3, District Regulations for short-term residential rental overlay zone and Appendix A, fees, fines, and penalties. This is coming off of the meeting that'll happen today at 2:30, 2 o'clock after the public hearings, all the data information that the subcommittee of planning and zoning took in, that they're formulating, then they're gonna put it to their committee today at 2, and whatever decision will then be sent over to us on next Tuesday.
And we have the liberty of tweaking it?
Sure, you're the council. And it'll be up for discussion. So that'll be, and I know a lot of the main things are gonna be implementing and purchasing the software. Probably a small, quick presentation on what that is, also the fees. And then fines and just, you know, because there's been a lot of discussion on grandfathering, limiting, reducing, all of that. Then on closed session, standard, personal matters, discussion, the village manager's contract. Kind of touchy, buddy. Man, oh, man.
And
Another
then,
closed session.
and then aren't we gonna do something with the flood? No?
If we have it, but it sounds like it's not gonna be ready on
Oh, I thought
on
that
the
they,
flood,
I thought we said half of it will be done.
maybe.
Mayor and council, you should see a portion of that on the meeting for the 11th.
Hopefully, and hopefully that's the floodway, floodplain,
Yeah.
so we,
And that'll be
especially in
for
the
Upper
upper
Rio Doso.
canyon and
Yes.
down the, all the way down through by the chamber and everything, so we'd like to see that if possible.
Okay.
The manager's contract, threatened and pending litigation, and then discussion, purchase acquisition of real property, water rights, get an update on that fiasco. Anything else anybody wants to see that you can think of? And hopefully, we may have something coming out of our meetings. We're supposed to meet with the governor tomorrow, or is that today? Tomorrow? And so, okay, anything?
Nada?
Going once? Twice? Okay. That covers the agenda for today. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Jenny, are we going? Yeah, the reason I keep saying no candles is because your insurance goes up.
Oh, because of